Conversations with Svend, offering expert insights and guidance around topics like relationships, sex, and money from a neurodiverse projector viewpoint. We're asking good questions and seeking the answers. Welcome to this second episode of Conversations with Svend. Today's guest is Jem Ayres. She's an orgasmic embodiment coach. She's a certified sexological bodyworker, Tantra practitioner, facilitator of events, including full body orgasm retreats. Jem is featured in Channel 4 productions like Sexuality with Alice Levine, and more recently in Channel 5's third season of Adults Only, episode 8, I Need Sexual Healing. Welcome, Jem.
Thank you. Lovely to be here, Sven. I'm looking forward to this conversation.
Yeah, thank you so much for devoting this time with me. I am booked to participate in your retreat next week in Derbyshire. By the time this episode airs, I'll have more of a grounded, embodied experience of what it's like to work with you. We're going to talk about sex, we're going to talk about pleasure, we're going to talk about the need for ecstasy and bliss, and we're going to talk about full body orgasms. So let's begin with orgasmic embodiment. What does orgasmic embodiment mean for the layperson?
Thank you so much, Sven. Yeah, great question to start with, isn't it? What does orgasmic embodiment mean? For me, I always knew that my work was a lot more than kind of sex and sex coaching. And people would come to me thinking they want, they'd get better technique at how to thrust or how to last longer. And we can absolutely talk about that. But actually what I'm interested in is how sexuality and our embracing of our sexuality and our releasing of any shame around our sexuality actually has an effect on our wider life. So how when I'm in my kind of fullest sexual potential without the fear and guilt and shame that is put on us around our bodies and our pleasure and our sex, then actually I walk in the world different. I make different decisions. I set different boundaries. I attract different people. I take greater risks, maybe different job opportunities. I'm a more generous person to my partner, to my friends, to my children, so it's actually how our sexuality affects all of our life and all of its aspects. That's, for me, is how we embody orgasmic potential.
Yeah. It's quite an intriguing phrase, isn't it? It's I guess it wasn't your careers advisor that says, I see you as
Absolutely not. I can't remember what they suggested, but orgasmic embodiment wasn't one of it.
Right. Tell me, I'd really like to invite you to tell your story. I know some of it is fascinating, and I would love more people to be able to hear how you came to this, where you are today.
Thank you. So I grew up always surrounded by spirituality, but I knew there was something more than the church or than palmistry or than prayer. And I always knew it was deeper. And in my 20s, I experienced sexual shutdown. So basically where my body just stopped being able to have sex, want sex, or feel anything. And I didn't know what to do about that. And I went everywhere. I went to doctors, I went to healers, I went to therapists, I went to shamans, I asked my mum, and no one was really able to help me. I went to a hypnotherapist even. And what I noticed was no one was really able to talk about the practicals of sex and look me in the eye. Actually, everyone wanted to talk about my childhood and things like that, which is also absolutely valid, but it wasn't helping me make steps towards how do I practically get pleasure back into my body. And it wasn't until my late 20s that a friend recommended I do a women's Tantra group. And that really changed things for me overnight. So working through the body and be to access my kind of spirituality and my sexuality in that way really shifted so much more for me than the many years of therapy I'd had so far. And so I devoted myself to exploring the path of Tantra, both in weekends away and retreats, but also in myself and in my daily practice. By the time I was 32, I got a cancer diagnosis, and I was told that I should go home, spend time with my friends and my family, move to a ground floor flat because I wouldn't be able to make the stairs much longer. And hospice staff turned up, and I was told the only treatment they were able to offer me was palliative care. So, you know, the treatment I ended up taking had a 10% chance of working, and that 10% was stabilization at best. And I just knew that I couldn't just sit on the sofa and wait for the doctor to call me. I needed to do something to help heal my body. And I'd heard somewhere down the line kind of miracle cures, miracle healings through sexual energy. And I'd read a little bit around Mantak Chia, and read a little bit around Chi and movement through the body. And I just, through my Tantra practice, just started to experience and practice full body orgasm. And so I just thought, okay, if cancer are just cells that have mutated, and cancer and cells are mostly water, and water, for example, is affected by vibration and sound and words, as in the study of Dr. Emoto, the Japanese doctor who does water studies, and the effect of water molecules to positive and negative sound and words. I just realized I wanted to fill my body with as much positivity as possible. And as well as other things like, you know, making sure I was wearing great shoes and hula hooping and praying a lot, I also wanted to fill my body with physical vibration. And for me, that was full body orgasmic release. And so I set myself the task of having weekly kind of devotional time to send orgasmic energy to my cancer. And less than 6 months after cancer diagnosis, I was cancer-free. So I had an advanced melanoma, which is a skin cancer, which had traveled to my brain. And I had brain surgery when I was traveling in Thailand. That's when it was discovered. And then when they sent me home, they found tumors in my lung and my lymph node as well. And I was put on immunotherapy, I should say. I did do traditional treatment as well, but again, with only a 10% chance of it stabilizing me at best. And it was at that point I realized, okay, maybe I have something to teach here.
I think the answer to that question is yes. I think I feel, yeah, go on.
I never set out to be a teacher in this work. People just started coming to me.
Right. Yeah. I feel it'd be helpful, Jem, can you like explain that journey like more kind of specifically? So you had a diagnosis, so you accepted the diagnosis but not the prognosis, and you took matters in your own hand, and you wanted to focus on what would uplift you, but you were also doing other protocols, and you kind of, and you made radical changes in your life. Is that correct?
Yeah, absolutely. I just looked at the fact that cancer was born from a place of toxicity and maybe fear and just unhealthy behaviors. So I had to really closely look at my life, which was a great life, I thought, you know, at the time. And I was doing a job that I loved, but I just had to change a lot of things. So I was doing a job that I loved, but I was burnt out and working too hard. And my diet was your average, healthier than average, actually, balanced British diet. But I changed my diet to be alkaline, which is vegan, gluten-free, sugar-free, caffeine-free, alcohol-free. So it's kind of 80% of my plate would be vegetable, you know. And I did a lot of juicing, and I did a lot of detoxing, like coffee enemas and salt baths and skin scrubbing. And I did a lot around relaxation. So yoga, yin yoga, flotation, massage, lymph drainage massage. I did a lot of spiritual practice around prayer and meditation and shaking and dancing and singing and celebration of myself and my body and setting affirmations. And I did cannabis oil as well. And took a lot of cannabis oil, and I wasn't interested initially to take cannabis oil because I'd been a very heavy pot smoker in my teens, and I'd just given that up really. But it kept me very happy. And music also played a big part in actually just keeping me really buoyant. So I recognized when people start using the word cancer, that's when the fear hits, and everyone else around me was really fearful. And I just knew that fear wasn't going to be the place that my body would heal. So how can I keep myself as happy and as buoyant and alive as possible? So music, dancing, chanting, eating things that really fueled me, doing things that really fueled me, setting down the boundaries around the people and the places and the things that didn't fuel me. So yeah, there's an extension of everything else that I did.
It was 6 months from in that.
Just under 6 months. Yeah, I was diagnosed in October, put on treatment straight away. And I think it was the April-May scan I got the all clear. But it definitely been all clear before that because I felt that the tumours in my body had shrunk already. I could feel them, physically feel them disappear from my armpit.
Wow. I mean, it has that energy, miraculous, but then it's also like a practical miracle that you chose to live.
Yeah. Yeah, I absolutely chose to not go down the fear route, not to be a fighter, not to be a survivor, to be a lover, actually, like absolutely love myself, absolutely, do what I needed to do. It took quite a lot of discipline, and my tantric practice and being in pleasure with my body was part of the thing that kept me on track. Because I didn't ever want to be bogged down with the weight of the never-ending to-do list of cancer,
Yeah, it is extraordinary. That orgasmic energy at that time was these like full body orgasmic experiences.
Yeah, and I think the important thing with full body orgasmic experiences, because it's not the same as a peak orgasm, which is goal driven and kind of ends in this massive crescendo. It's this experience that rolls through your body and can keep going and going and going. I always say I'm 2 breaths away from orgasm, really. So it's like we're fueling ourselves. And if I'm full of that energy and I'm getting on with my day, then I just come from a far more vibrant, alive place than the drudgery of having to, go to the supermarket every week or whatever. So I walk differently, I feel differently, I connect with people differently.
It is very common sense, isn't it, really?
Yeah,
it's
and
just,
we look around us at people and they're kind of grey and they're gaunt, and I get that we all have challenges in life, and I also really want to honour that my cancer story is very different from a lot of other people's, and that not everyone has such a joyous experience with cancer. But it really was kind of like my initiation into, okay, how do you really want to live then? Like, actually, if you're choosing to live, because we all know that we're going to die, we're all going to die sooner than we expect and sooner than we want. And so how do I now step into this life? Whether I've got a day, a week, a month, a year, how do I now embrace living? And I want to be in pleasure as much as possible, even when I'm just doing the washing up,
There are talks on your website, jemayres.co.uk, where you're telling about this journey and the healing power of orgasm. What are the day-to-day health benefits of orgasmic living? What is happening on a physical and spiritual and emotional level, hormones levels of?
Perfect. Okay, thank you. So the difference, I've already spoken briefly about the difference between full body orgasmic experience and peak orgasm. So what happens with peak orgasm in the brain is all of the chemicals that fire off in the brain, all of the good stuff. It can be quite an intense experience, like fireworks. under an MRI scanner. And that could be beautiful, but then if we have that quite intense peak experience, it can be actually quite a lot for our nervous system. And then the body can drop off and get a withdrawal symptom. So actually after your average orgasm or peak orgasm or ejaculation, the few days afterwards, and actually it takes 2 weeks, it says this experiment's been done in rats, it takes 2 weeks for the body, for the brain chemicals to get back to homeostasis, back to balance. We can have that withdrawal effect of all of those chemicals that are firing off, which are actually the same parts of the brain fire off as in when we're taking heroin, for example, you know, so it's actually like a real drug-fueled experience in our brain. We're not sober. And then we have the withdrawal effect, and then we have the crash. And ultimately, I don't think that's very good for our bodies. And that's when we can feel the void in us. So we kind of, then we reach for our unhealthy habits, like eating, you know, texting an ex-partner, whatever it is, all those bad things, you know, over shopping, smoking, drinking, reaching for more orgasms, you know, something to fill that void. And so for me, full body orgasm, because instead of a crescendo peak and a crash afterwards, it's more of a long rolling, slower experience over a period of time. It just feels healthier for the body. And also, you know, our immune system is affected. Our mental health is affected by touch and oxytocin and dopamine and all the really good stuff that fires off in us. And it's just a really healthy way to live life. Our bodies want to be in pleasure. Naturally, we want to be in pleasure. And often when I work with people, it's not necessarily about what more we need to do to create pleasure in our body. It's about, okay, what do we need to do less of so that pleasure can come through? Like, what do we need to release? What do we need to let go of? What do we need to be more aware of that we do? Or what do we need to, you know, notice about the messages or the conditioning that we've received through all of our years? And if they're not helpful, how can we kind of reprogram that or reframe that and reclaim it and step away from guilt, fear, shame around our sexuality?
It's so empowering, and that's what I love about your work. And yeah, I've learned so much from you over the years, from sessions online and group sessions, and I'm hoping that more people will kind of tune in. I am thinking, like, so you got many kind of trainings, etc. Can you explain again, like, what is the down-to-earth kind of definition of what is a sexological body worker? What does that mean, Jem?
Thank you. So I kind of come from a mix of modalities with my background. So I had many, many years of Tantric, Neo-Tantra and Taoist practices, which I absolutely love. And I still absolutely honor and comes through in my work. But I also recognized I wanted something a bit more solid. So that's when I went to Sexological Bodywork to find out the science and the nervous system and the trauma-informed approach to working with people in sexuality. Because ultimately, when you work with sexuality, there's no way that you can stay away from working with trauma, ultimately. Big T trauma, small t trauma, we all have it one way or another. Even just the messages that we've received have shut down our sexual expression to its fullest. And so sexological body worker for me is giving the body an experience of being as safe as possible with, and it can be a hands-on experience as well, hands on the body, to be able to receive an experience of touch, which feels healthy, helpful, supportive, which is particularly important for those of us that have tolerated touch that has been outside of consent, you know? So, and all of us, when we were babies, were passed around all the family, and this isn't a bad thing, but we would have learned very early on that our body isn't really our own. We've all been told that we need to, you know, hug the aunts we don't really want to hug, or, you know, sit still and stop fidgeting. So we're constantly told that our body's wrong and isn't really our own, and that its full expression isn't acceptable. And so part of my work is about unlearning all of that and start saying, okay, when I strip that all back, how does my body want to be now? So sexological bodywork can be about touch, can be about working with the nervous system, can be a trauma-informed approach at opening our body's capacity up to feeling more. And when we open our body up to feeling more, it's not necessarily just pleasure we feel. We might also feel the pain and discomfort, or we might also feel the numbness. It gives us more information about ourselves and our body.
Yeah, I think that's a very common, that feeling of being numb. That's definitely from my experience of going into tantric work, etc. That I just realized like how numb I actually, yeah. But that's also a feeling. Yeah, it feels to me like a lot of your work is that kind of deconditioning and then reclaiming this bodily autonomy, and I can relate, and I think most of us have just we were told to, yeah, as you say, exactly, and I think it's wonderful when I hear about parents who are teaching their children that, then you don't have to do all these conditioned things that you don't want to do. And Jem, when I think of you and you're very wonderful and enthusiastic and life force, orgasmic energy. And I also think of all the other wonderful people that are working in this field that you kind of either directly have introduced me to, or I've mentioned for the wonderful social media kind of, or so there's like Ishana Spears, who works around cuddling, facilitating cuddling, and done a lot of work around the menstrual cycle and supporting men in supporting women in that. And then I listened to Madeline Monroe, if I get the name right, with your podcast there. And there's the wonderful Catherine Hale, who works around nervous system regulation and expansion, and the ability to create a secure attachment style relationship with money and wealth and prosperity and abundance, etc. And there's just a wealth of beautiful people that I feel like are in this field, and you have introduced me to. And then there are people like the wonderful sexual educator Sherry Winston, and the books she's written. So I'd like to invite you to talk about a book like this, The Anatomy of Female Arousal, and also then there's Betty Martin, The Wheel of Consent, The Art of Giving and Receiving. And I would really like, because I just get so much from these books. I just absolutely love these books, and I'd go as far as to say this is probably one of the best books I've ever come in contact with, because it's totally transformed my view of so many things that I kind of, growing up in I think without being too a patriarchal paradigm, I have not known about. It was just out of reach. So if I could invite you to share, please, Jem.
Oh, beautiful. Thanks, Sven. Yeah, I think there's such a range of richness to be learned from all of the people who do my work, or different versions of my work. And I run something called the Sex Chats as well, where I invite my friends and colleagues and peers and people I respect and value to come and talk, because I want people to know that this is a community. Because so many people come to me and go, oh, I didn't even know that job existed, or you must be the only one. It's like, no, there's this whole network of people who are doing this work. So if I'm not your flavor to work with, there will be someone out there, and we've all got our different angles and specialisms, and we're all constantly evolving as well. None of us really sit still with our work, it seems. And another way to make this work as accessible as possible is my Empowered Women's Book Club. And I've covered both the Woman's Anatomy of Arousal that you spoke about, and I've also covered in my couples book club, The Art of Receiving and Giving, Betty Martin's work. And I just find that makes it really accessible for people because it can be scary to talk about sexuality. Where do we start? So actually, if we kind of start with a book, that's really helpful. And the reason I started this book club is because so many women would email me saying, I can't afford to have sessions with you. Can you recommend me a book? And I just found myself replying, you don't learn this work from the book so much. You've got to get into the practicals and into the practice and into the embodiment of it. I didn't read any books about Tantra till I'd been studying it intensely and turning up at workshops and events and teachings for well over 5 years. you know. And about that point, I suddenly realized I could start to understand the books. But so I just started running the Empowered Women's Book Club and my couples book club, because I recognized that this was a way for people to embody the practices. So we cover a little bit of the book, and then I'd be leading practices and embodiment homework and creating a network of people to have support. So it's a really accessible way to turn up every week and be supported in this kind of work and not be so isolated. And it's almost like a de-shaming experience. You know, like we don't talk about sex over the usual dinner table, but actually we can turn up once a week and talk with 15, 20 people from all over the globe about sexuality and about our curiosity and about our confusions, and ask our questions live to a sex coach. So I think that's really helpful. I don't know if that's what you meant, Sven. I've forgotten what your question was. I went off on one, I'm afraid.
There's no such thing as going in my. I love a good a good tangent. You know, I adore a good tangent. Well,
Good.
I want to.
I'm hoping that I'm kind of on path with the tangent.
Yeah. No, we were on the road to speaking about the Empowered Women's Book Club.
Oh, good. I dropped it in.
Yeah, it's wonderful. We were on the path. I just wanted to tell a little bit more about this book specifically and why it is you recommend this. This comes recommended by Jem, who's a sex coach. It comes recommended by me, Svend, who's a podcaster. I think it's a wonderful, wonderful book. And why is it that you love it so much? And what's the universe it kind of opens up for people?
The Woman's Anatomy of Arousal by Sherry Winston is a really accessible book. It's very practical. It gives no fluff descriptions and exercises, and it's just so much information packed into one book. And I recommend it to both my female and my male clients also. And I think women find it really opens up the mystery of their bodies. You know, we just don't know this information. We don't know it from school, from science, from sex education. You know, this is the kind of information that doctors don't know, or, you know, sex workers don't even know.
Very wonderful. Do you mind speaking a little bit about Betty Martin's The Wheel of Consent as well, the art of receiving, giving, and how that informs your practice as well and your work?
And then if we move on to Betty Martin's work, she created a whole a spectrum of work called The Wheel of Consent, which is basically how we receive and how we give touch. And it talks about touch within consent and touch outside of consent. And it talks about how we all have different touch needs, and they're really valuable and they're really important. But quite often we sit in one area or the other. And that's how we get our touch needs met. Whereas actually we do need to explore the full spectrum, ideally, because if we don't, we might get our needs met in slightly non-consensual, slightly murky ways, for example. So, for example, something I often teach women in particular is how to take. So when we're touching someone else, we're not necessarily doing it for them, you know, rubbing their back. It's like, actually, how can I explore my partner's body through touching for my own experience? I ran a women's temple about 3 weeks ago, and we spent the whole day taking, and it got deeper and it got deeper and it got deeper. And it was really created a massive shift for people, I think. And I got a lot of emails afterwards saying how powerful it was, because especially women haven't been taught that it's okay to take. We have this idea of taking is a thing that's outside of consent. Because actually, can our partner just go, yeah, okay, I'm going to allow you access to my body for you to have an experience. And I can look after my own boundaries. And if at any point it needs to pause or stop, I will say, but other than that, I have willingness to allow you to experience my body in a way that isn't for me. And it doesn't even have to be a turn on. You know, we have this idea that every time we touch our partner, you know, we should be doing something to make it feel good for them. There's actually, can they just be willing, you know? And I think that for me is one of the biggest nuggets of Betty Martin's work, and everyone's going to have a different experience. But, you know, I think when Betty Martin's work was first came out, I'm going to say 6 or 7 years ago, body workers rushed to her trainings, and her work was part of my sexological bodywork training also, because it really changed things for body workers in how we were touching and how we were educating our clients as well. So if I say to a client, is there anywhere on your body you want to be touched? And they just go, no, 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 touch me anywhere. I'm like, okay, but that isn't you actually making really clear requests and setting really clear boundaries. Can we own our desire that I definitely want to be touched here, here, and here, and I definitely don't want to be touched here, here, and here? It's valuable.
It is very, very valuable. It's that whole thing of being able to say, this is what I want, you know, it's just very I would love to hear what you're offering for male-bodied individuals as well. I know there are mixed events and many things going on, but what's the online for people in men's bodies?
Thank you for asking. It's quite difficult to get men in a group together, especially when the discussion is around sexuality. So if I run a women's only group, the women flock in. If I run a mixed group, suddenly the men's tickets are gone in 48 hours. Men far prefer to be in a space with women, it seems. So I don't offer much, which is all male, but I have offered something called Holding the Seed, which is a 4-week intensive teaching men online around semen retention and ejaculatory choice, because that is a hot topic that men come to me with. In the past, I've run something called the Cock course, which was 4 weeks, and it was covering 1 week ejaculatory choice, the next week erection dissatisfaction, the next week pleasure in our partner, and the next week, oh, I've completely forgotten, performance anxiety. But that only just created little notches or doorways into it. So I thought, okay, I'm going to take ejaculatory choice and semen retention and build a whole course around it. And it's 4 weeks, and it could be 12, you know. And it's brilliant. I've got 11 men have signed up, and I'm running it again in another, once this one's finished, I'll be running it again. And it's really powerful, I think, for men to have permission to speak about their practices and their experience and be heard by others. And I always think that everyone on the screen or in the group is our teacher. Like, we learn from each other. And it's not necessarily about sharing your biggest traumas and things like that. It's more about, okay, I'm going to offer you some practices and I want you to go and put them to work, so to speak, this week. Do your homework, come back. What did you find? What did you learn about yourself? What was interesting? What was challenging? What do you notice around your habits of touch? Were you breathing enough? How was your sound? What were the beliefs that came in? You know, why are we wanting to prolong our ejaculation? If it's to, you know, give our partner more pleasure, can we actually make that more about us somehow? Our why of needing to do this work needs to be bigger than the drive to orgasm. So that's already, you know, we're deepening our intention around semen retention and ejaculatory choice. And whilst, you know, wanting to pleasure our partner more is an absolutely beautiful and generous gift, how about making it more about us? And some of the men are finding that they're experiencing pleasure that they've never experienced before. They're finding things that are new. They're finding things that are less intense, but not any less powerful. They're finding that they're in more control. I don't usually like this word, but they kind of feel a bit more in control, but not just in their sex lives, but in life in general. Those who are choosing to practice semen retention, like a 21-day challenge or something, are feeling that they're showing up more creative in their life, for example, more creative, more generous. They've got more motivation. They're more productive, you know, and they're more giving to everyone around them, including their partners. So it's making them into being, you know, really generous, brilliant lovers, I think. But I'm always bringing it back to them, focusing on them and themselves and their pleasure. Because often the idea is that men are the givers, they're the doers, they're the penetrators. They have to create a woman's experience, create a woman's orgasm. And it's like, okay, back to us, back to our own bodies. And I'm loving it. I'm absolutely loving working with a group of men. It's a real honor.
It was a fascinating point also for people listening to this. Jem, you got your website, and you got so many wonderful kind of entrance points, and you blog and you write, and you have this, I can always recognize this as Jem writing. You have got your very own kind of way of being like very bold and brave, and but there was an interesting point where you were speaking exactly about this, how, and maybe that's also because of the shadow of the masculine, etc., and men have been told that they're like, you know, and so there's men and women, but what is your guidance to those who are like this kind of, oh, I just want to please, like, and also the people pleasers amongst us, kind of, you know, recovering. Would you want to expand a little bit more on that, please?
So if someone comes to me, lots of people come to me and say, oh, I'm such a giver. I'm like, okay, but are you also getting your taking needs met? So again, circling back around to Betty Martin's work, you know, are you getting your taking needs met in a conscious way where you're saying, I'd like to take from your body, or I'm recognizing I want to take here? Because if you're not, then you're gonna find taking through giving. You know, the amount I've lost track of the amount of times someone said, would you like a massage? I'm like, and about halfway through the massage, I go, oh, this massage isn't really for me, is it? It's so that you can have access to my body. And that's okay. And maybe it's someone I really love and they're well-meaning and they're beautiful, but it has an effect on me and on my nervous system. It's like, oh, hang on a minute, the gift isn't solely for me here. So if we're just really clear, then we know the parameters with which we're stepping into the experience with. So when someone says to me, I'm such a giver, if they're not able to take, that's a bit of a warning sign for me. So I would set them practices around taking. And also I speak a lot around boundaries as well, as a people pleaser or as an overgiver. So are you good at setting boundaries? And all of this work, it's not just about sex, it is about life. So where do I not set boundaries in sex with my body? Where do I not set boundaries with my own body and myself? But where in the world do I not set boundaries with my boss, with my kids, with my friends, with my family? Because if we're not setting boundaries and we're giving and we're giving and we're giving, we're not a bottomless pit. And if we're giving with some sort of expectation that we're going to receive through giving, then we're going to end up in resentment, you know. And this is quite often the case, and people don't know why they're so pissed off. And it's with their partner, long-term partners, it's because they've been giving and giving and giving, hoping that their partner will give them something back, but without consciously saying it. You know.
It's like an aspect of covert contracting, isn't that, kind of codependent kind of?
Yeah, and I think we all do it because we've never had this kind of language or this awareness anymore. So if someone's a people pleaser or an overgiver, my first thing is like, great, you need to learn how to receive. You need to learn how to receive. And that might be through the very daring practice of figuring out what's really good for you and asking for it. That can be a big deal, because often people who are the givers or the people pleasers or the doers haven't spent any time looking at what they really like. So they don't know what they like. So first it's okay, let's focus on you and what feels good for you, not what you think will feel good for other people. I mean, this could be a whole podcast on its own. Aspect of people pleasing in sexuality.
Definitely, it's a very, very, very rich and very deep topic.
I mean, all of these topics that we've covered, we're kind of skating over the surface to get through them, but all of these I could talk on for about a week, I'm afraid.
Yeah. No, but you're very, you don't have to restrain yourself. You're very welcome just to keep talking. I'm not going to stop you. And I think, you know, I'm on the spectrum of neurodiversity, and in our little pre-talk, there's this element of being ahead of myself, you know, and I just want to, you know, but I think we're doing really well, actually. I think we are, I mean, I think it's opened up a lot of, you know, imagination for people already, I would imagine, listening to this. I'm definitely feeling that this is just very valuable, what you're sharing.
Oh, I'm glad. I'm good. Good.
Yeah. I would like to talk about this, you know, being trauma informed. That's one thing that we hear a lot, and and I would like to kind of inquire into definitions of what it means. So sexual trauma is, very wide, like that transgression you're talking about. It can be micro, it can be big T trauma, it can be many things, but I'd like to ask, like, is there such a thing as gold standard of being trauma informed? What does it really mean on the high level of definition, kind of?
I think there's something about, I'm not even sure there is a gold standard, because trauma is such a nuanced thing. You could be the most trauma-informed practitioner in the world, and yet the person you're working with could still have a trauma response. There are so many different ways that we can work with trauma. So if we think about our comfort zone, and then just outside of our comforts, everyone's comfort zone is a different, size. Like some people might not even be comfortable leaving the house, and other people are really comfortable on stage in front of thousands of people. So everyone's comfort zone is different. And just outside of our comfort zone is the learning zone. And some people's learning zones, again, are quite big, and we can kind of be in a less comfortable place, but kind of okay with it because we're learning and we're finding our way with it. And that's okay if we can step outside of our comfort zone, learn something new, and then come back into the comfort zone to kind of integrate it and house it. So go out, learn something new, come back to the safety of our comfort zone, to our own bodies, to a space which feels held for us. And then we can keep expanding our comfort zone that way. But outside of the learning zone, we have the terror zone. And that's the unhelpful part. We don't want to fling ourselves into experiences that feel unsafe physically, emotionally, or anything else. And sometimes the learning zone can feel incredibly unsafe for the body. Even if the head is going, it's fine for me to turn up to this new course or this new workshop, the nervous system might be having a very different experience, because in the past we've been taught, and if I kind of focus on sexuality here, in the past, we've been maybe shamed in our childhood for talking about something to do with sex or bodies or pleasure. And an adult has had a response, even a very loving, well-meaning adult has given or somehow a shaming response. We've learned that our bodies aren't okay and it's not safe to talk about sex, and we shut down. And that houses in our body and that could be like, let's think of it as a micro trauma, or at least a shock to the system. And that can be where we go back to every time we try and talk about sex, And that's just talking about sex. That's not even actually doing it or being it or living it. And so I know a lot of people, when I run the sex chats, people come to the sex chats and they're part of the audience, and there's options for asking questions to the speakers. And it's completely optional. You don't have to do it. But there's usually a handful of people that ask some great questions, and that's enough. But even just being in a room with other people talking around aspects of sexuality is too much for people. And because we've learned that sexuality isn't safe, it's not safe, it's not acceptable, we'll get, pushed out of the family or kicked out of the tribe, it feeds into our basic survival fears that if I talk about sex, I'm not going to be loved or lovable. And so when we're trauma-informed around sexuality, we just have to be really aware of taking people at their own organic pace of learning. And that might even be slowing them down, because some people can speed up to not feel anything. And we're like, okay, let's bring it right back. Let's slow it down even more, this practice, whatever it is, whether it's talking about sexuality, whether it's experiencing touch. I've had people come to me for bodywork sessions, and I've suggested doing some work on the belly. And they'd be like, yeah, sure, fine, no worries, doesn't sound challenging. And they lay down and I don't even get to the belly, I just touch their arm. And suddenly there's this massive release of tears and fear. Because what we're doing is we're creating an environment, and we don't usually say create safety, because I can't actually create safety for people. I can make it as safe as possible. But if someone doesn't feel safe in their body, we can't create safety. So it's giving someone an environment that feels as safe as possible, where they're in control. So they're kind of directing everything. They've got choice around everything. I make sure that they can use their voice, say no, say pause, so that they can have an experience in a way which might hopefully repattern or reprogram the negative experiences they've had before, or the less helpful experiences they've had before. I forgot what the question was halfway through.
That's quite all right. You answered it. You answered
Great,
it
that'll
fine.
do.
Yeah.
Was it, what is a sexological body worker?
No. We are
trauma informed.
trauma informed.
Jesus.
That's quite all right. That's just one of the side effects of orgasmic living, isn't it? Like, it's all intertwined, isn't it?
25D, baby.
It's all intertwined. It's quite all right, Jem. I think you covered it beautifully. I'd love to, in that spirit. So, being in what you're doing work, that you need to resource yourself. You need to be, you can't give if you don't have what you don't have, etc. So, I'd like to speak about, and you can be like this securely attuned attachment role model for people, and you're helping people to establish their own kind of self-care and self-love approaches, etc. What keeps you healthy and wholesome? What's your kind of approach and those kind of...
Thanks for asking. It took a long time for me to figure out what self-care is, and I do need to keep myself super resourced to be able to work with people. I try and do something every day for my mental need, my spiritual need, and my physical need. And I do yoga most days. I get to the gym most days. And I know that really helps me actually physically, mentally, emotionally, and spiritually. And I also try and look after my diet. I have green juice. I try and be really aware of the good stuff that I'm putting in my body. So less processed, less gluten, less sugar, that kind of thing. And I'm vegan also, which I think is really helpful for me in the idea that, if I'm working with people around healing trauma, I don't want to buy into an en masse culture where animals are traumatized on a daily basis, when for me, that's needless. And so that helps me both physically and mentally, knowing that I'm contributing to an environment which is more loving and more full of pleasure. I want the world to be full of pleasure. And I think putting down boundaries, especially around work, because I love my work and I'm very popular and there's a bit of a waiting list to work with me. And I did absolutely in the past overwork and hit burnout, or hit at least the edge of burnout quite a lot. And I know that when I'm more resourced, I can just show up better for my clients. And so I try to only work from midday onwards, and the mornings is my time. The mornings is my time, so that I can show up really able to be present. This word presence is used a lot and in mindfulness communities and in conscious communities, but what does it actually mean? And actually being present is a really tough job, especially for an hour with a client, to be absolutely present and in service to them and their needs. So part of that is making sure that I'm not overgiving, and I'm fueling myself so that I have enough capacity for people and whatever my clients bring me.
Yeah, it's very wonderful. I have been thinking, so you when you in the trauma, so you're talking about safety and in contextualizing with the world we live in, masculine, feminine dynamics, etc. How would you guide women to keep themselves safe, and how can we as a culture create more of a sense of keeping women safe, like in that's a question I have.
Okay, thank you. I think safety, regardless of gender, actually, as I was saying, is about how we can set boundaries for ourselves. And these boundaries don't just start with sex and abuse and assault. They do start in the small micro ways, like how we set boundaries with our children and how we set boundaries with our partner and at work. And so we get to practice boundaries, which gives us a felt sense of self, that I'm safe to get my needs met. It's not dangerous to say no to someone. It's not dangerous to say, pause, let me think about this tomorrow. And so that I don't have to be in duty to anyone. Because I think quite often the idea, if we are talking about genders, there's been a lot of conditioning around women. If we look at the traditional 50s housewife, that wasn't that long ago. That was only like our grandparents and our parents' age, you know, really. This idea that we're in service to the family, or we're in service to our partner, or we're in service, just being a mother is in service to the community. And it's this constant idea that we never get a day off, really. Even when we, you know, the feminism's brilliant. I'm a diehard feminist, but what I also notice is that now I'm doing all the jobs as well as the potential of full-time mother, you know? So it's like, how can I put the boundaries down for myself? And if we practice this in a way that is kind of micro on a daily basis, that means that when, if we're talking about physical threat or sexual threat, we have a more practiced neuro pathway in our brain and in our nervous system to be able to work with that. Because so many women, what I hear is assault isn't necessarily when strangers leap out of bushes. It's more slowly and slowly and slowly boundaries get overstepped by people that we know, you know, or partners or friends of partners, you know, and we let it slide and we let it slide and let it slide. And suddenly we're in an experience that we didn't necessarily know that we were in, you know. You know, we kind of halfway through sex, we kind of go, how did I even get here? How did I even get, I thought I was just receiving a massage, you know. It's back to that classic.
Yes. We are coming closer to our finishing, but I wanted to ask, like, what can men specifically do to make women in their lives feel more safe?
Oh, thank you. I think it's really great to look at the role of patriarchy, and this is quite a big, again, another massive topic. And there's someone I work with called Bear Phillips, who's a brilliant body worker and male coach. And he's called the Feminist Love Coach. And he's brilliant at working with men. And he's writing a book called Feminism Will Make a Man Out of You. And it's all about recognizing the blind spots maybe that men have around how society looks at and treats women. And again, it can be in really micro ways, you know, because women can now have credit cards and get mortgages and live happy single lives and never have to have children without anyone really blinking an eye about it too much today. But it's these small ways in which we always assume that your doctor is a male, for example, you know, or that we call a plumber a female plumber. Instead of, we would never say, oh yeah, the male plumber came round the other day, you know. So there's just little ways, or commenting on women's bodies. So, you know, would you actually say that to a man? Would you say that to a man? Oh, that's not a very flattering photo. Would you say that to a man? Maybe you would, I suppose. But also, what has my image and my photo got to do with your terms on your terms of what flattering is, for example? So it's probably something around taking your work to a man who has worked on this, like checking in with men's work, checking in with men's coaching. You know, I always recommend male body workers, for example, have a female mentor, especially if you're working with women full time. It's like, have a female mentor. So you've got someone to check in with, be accountable with, talk through what kind of biases we might have when we come from whatever gender bodied we're in.
And you work with all genders and all sexual orientations, etc., etc. Jem, I just, anyway, there's a little bit of theme in this podcast because I had Shirley J. Whitehead, the dating relationship coach, speaking to her, and she had a dream about me in 2016, how we connected and this sort of stuff. I had a dream with you when
I don't know if I know this. Exciting times.
Well, when you were coaching me and you appeared in a dream and you said a woman can only open up and receive if she feels safe. She will ultimately only feel safe when she's loved.
That sounds like something I might say. So how can we create safety for our female partners? Emotional safety, physical safety, spiritual safety? Is there permission around her to be her fullest, which also means her messiest? Is there acceptance of everything around her bodies, whether that's her menopause, whether that's her bleed, whether that's her, you know, kind of post-childbirth body? You know, can we be really accepting of the fluidity in a female body? Male bodies are kind of straightforward. They're kind of straight lines. They just go to aging. Women's bodies circle around all over the place. You know, we've got a lot going on.
Jem, time has flown, and it's been absolutely wonderful. I feel there needs to be an episode 2. Are you willing? Will you accept my invite?
That would be lovely.
I'll invite you back. It's really wonderful. I want to say in my next episode, I got the very wonderful Kerry Wise. She is conscious rebirthing in warm water coach, and I have invited her to come. And I'm looking forward to seeing you next weekend, Jem. Time and money boundaries, we must be strict, and we've reached the time, but it's been an absolute pleasure. So lots of love, and I will see you in Derbyshire.
Thank you, Svend. See you at the Full Body Orgasm Retreat. Ciao, ciao.
Take care. Bye. Thank you for coming, Jem.
Thank you.
Conversations with Svend.